Prejudice easily kills, but it does not easily die. Verse number 46. By fighting it is impossible to win. By fighting one another no faith is destroyed. One who argues against another's faith, not recognizing this, fights in vain and perishes. This should be understood. Commentary. Although this verse at first glance seems very simple, it has great inner depth and detail. Its implications would not be exhausted even if we were to dwell on it for many months. Two of the 6 darshanas of the philosophical visions of India are Purva and Uttara Mimamsa, the anterior critic developed by Jaimini and the posterior critic expounded by Badarayana. Jaimini's darshana is called the study of dharma, and Badarayana's is the study of Brahman. We have been speaking of sama and anya, sameness and the other. The other is where we encounter specific qualities. Dharma is one man's specific quality, which distinguishes him from another. Salt is different from sugar because of their different specific qualities. You cannot take the saltishness out of salt or the sugariness from sugar because those are their dharma. On the other hand, the very word Brahman implies all-inclusiveness. It does not allow for any separation or differentiation. One is the differentiating, the other is the uniting. Those who see only difference and do not see unity cannot agree with one another. Those who see only unity do not see another to agree or disagree with. The Dharma Sutras of Jaimini presented the development of the ritualistic aspect of life, while Badarayana's darshana gave rise to the doctrine of renunciation. Thus, these schools have 2 totally different outlooks on life. The householder stood by the one and the sannyasi or renunciate stood by the other. In India, they have been arguing over these ideas since the beginning, and their implications are pondered by people all over the world. Religion is not merely one man's private opinion. A religion that rules a man's life consists of his total value matrix, which even he is not fully aware of. You do not know how deep the roots of your convictions are, how far they are going to take you, or with what other things they are entwined. The total matrix of life is lying unseen and often unimagined. It is very hard to discern its true or whole nature, which is shared collectively with our fellow beings, as most of our life urges are not only in the person but also in the collective unconscious, or the collective wholeness of the society to which we belong. Even in people who are not at all religious, or who are even anti-religious, there are subterranean currents of a religious pull. 2 classic examples we can give are the thoughts and writings of Einstein and Freud, 2 of the most extraordinary people of our time. Neither of them had any leaning to the particular religious background in which they were born, Judaism. Yet the undercurrents of their thoughts contain powerful Jewish feelings. To some extent, these were a form of reaction to being opposed as Jews by others, even though they did not think of themselves that way. The more someone attacks you, the more your dormant underlying traits become vigorous. Other traits were learned so early in life that they were not consciously perceived by them, or were so much a part of their culture as to be invisible. This is a verse which we have to examine very closely. We will go step by step. First, there is the statement of a general principle. Porutu jayapartasadhyam. It is difficult to win by fighting. You can overpower another person, but you will not win anything. What is the difference between overpowering and winning? There is an expression, he won my heart. You cannot win another man's heart by fighting him, but you can by giving yourself to him. When you give yourself to another in love, you win. But when you use force, you don't win, you overpower. This is the first distinction we need to understand. By fighting, we don't win. We only concentrate the opposition to a fever pitch. When an animal is at bay, pushed into a corner, where it cannot go any further, it has only one choice. With all desperation, it will pounce upon you and bite you. What is happening in this situation? The life meaning of the animal becomes so concentrated that its whole system becomes filled with it. Every atom vibrates with the meaning of its life. When a man becomes angry, his whole body shivers. You can see hatred for you concentrated in his eyes, in his look, in his word, posture, everything. He gains a certain absolutist dimension at this time. There is no compromising. A dog, a cat, a rat, anything will become an absolute total whole if you try to strike at the very center or keynote of its life. There is a story that when Mansur Halaj was beaten, he became all the more convinced of his oneness with Allah. His hands and legs were chopped off, but he thought that it was only the hands and legs that were cut, not his love for Allah. Then he was hanged, beheaded, and cut into pieces, and still every little piece chanted, An al-Haq, I am Allah. When he was burned, the flame said, An al-Haq, and every particle of his ashes said, An al-Haq. Finally, his ashes were thrown in the ocean. Each wave came crashing back, murmuring, An al-Haq, An al-Haq. So by fighting, you don't win. The next point in the verse is that if one person with conviction fights another person with conviction, it is not to the advantage of either. The dialectics of this situation produces either double loss or double gain. If you fight, you get double loss. But if you come together, you get double gain. We can see from history that fighting between religions has not eradicated any of them. Many times the Jews have been decimated by various forces in different parts of the world, only to come back with renewed vigor. History recounts at least 4,000 or 5,000 years of continuous triad against the Jews, but the virility, inner strength, stamina, message, and power of their religion could not be undermined. The Roman Empire was at its height when poor Jesus of Nazareth came along. They thought he would be easy to crush, but instead the Roman Empire fell. The emperors converted to Christianity. The teaching of Christ could not be abolished. Luther and others tried to abolish Catholicism forever, but the Catholic Church still stands as strong as ever, and the Catholics thought they could defeat the protesters by hanging them and burning them, but that only increased the numbers of Protestants. A recent example comes from a great superpower. America decided that communism is bad and democracy is good. just what is communism and just what is democracy. They could have discussed this in a university forum, but instead they sent 1 million young Americans to Vietnam to decide the issue. They thought that by fighting they could show that communism was wrong. They completely overlooked that they were going to an alien place where the people had ancient ties to the land, above and below any issues of communism or democracy. The people there were fighting for their lives, their homes, and their very dear land. On the other side, the soldiers were conscripted, so they didn't have much zeal or zest for the war. So what happened? The Americans were not only defeated, but the presidents and the architects of the war who were tied up with it are considered to have committed one of the greatest evils in human history. This is a recent example, but the same thing happened during the medieval Christian Crusades. Did the Crusaders finally do away with the Muslims and the Jews? The synagogue, the church, and the mosque are still standing side by side in all those countries. Let us look into the inner structure of this thing called religion in order to understand why it cannot be destroyed through fighting. Judaism has conceived a symbolic tree of life arranged with a top and bottom, 2 flanks and a center. On the top are wisdom, reason, and knowledge. On the side are greatness, strength, eternity, and majesty. At the bottom is sovereignty, and in the center is beauty. The 3 words at the top look almost alike: wisdom, reason, and knowledge. Yet we know they are not the same. Wisdom transcends reason. You do not know the depth from which wisdom comes. You do not know its scope of infinitude. You do not know its sublimity. It is so vast, so deep. When you say reason, there is movement. You move from one vision to another, correlating one to the other and showing its relevance. If knowledge is like the whole ocean, reason is like the waves moving across the surface, one after the other. There is precision and order, arrangement and logic. So you are not only wise, but also reasonable. You have the knowledge to argue and establish your case. What's the difference between wisdom and knowledge? There is a saying, he has the know-how. If wisdom is an eternal, continuous, and never-failing fountain, which is ever supplying the fuel of your life, knowledge has reference to a situation. There is a structural compactness which enables the situation to have a function that can be protective and creative, and to make total sense to you. Then you can say you have a knowledge of it. So Judaism says, when you have come to us, understand that we care for wisdom. We have reason and know-how. That makes the religion invulnerable. If you go still further, they say, it's not about me. I may be no one, but I belong to an inestimable greatness which I glorify. That puts strength into my veins and muscles. The strength of this body, this mind, this spirit, is derived from a greatness that belongs to the Absolute. And it is not a brute force because beauty is its center. How can you fight that? Before beauty, you become fully disarmed. If someone brings his might, his courage, his strength in the form of beauty, it doesn't just overpower you, it overwhelms you. You are filled with it, and the ecstasy of it makes you mad. You become drunk with it. The Jews go on to say, we belong to eternity and not to history. Only in history is there a beginning and an end. We belong to eternity. We see the majesty of it. This cannot be defeated because it's a law, a principle that rules our life, our sovereignty. When you see Judaism in this simple yet intricate representation, it is overwhelming. You cannot fight it. You don't even want to fight it. In any religion, similar principles are present one way or another. In the Vedic context, a world tree is represented in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It says, "There is a tree, it has its roots above and its branches below. Those who know about it say, it never expends. It is never destroyed. Its leaves are the songs of the Vedas. When a knower of wisdom becomes overjoyed, and in exaltation from him come the glorifying hymns. Those are the leaves of the tree. A knower of this tree is the true knower. Its branches, which ramify in different directions, are the gunas, the triple modalities of nature. They go on multiplying and multiplying. They are producing objects of interest. The mind branches off to different interests. The different interests are all implied by the different objects of desires. Just as it has roots above, from whence it is nourished by the unknown, it has roots below, which make it firm. The roots below are karma, the action and interaction which bind all of us into a compact whole. When you touch me, you touch another 100 people, because I belong to another 100. When I touch you, I touch many unknown people. Our karmas bind us. To what depth and darkness they have gone, we do not know. No one can break this. This is what is called the dharma." End of quotation. Just as beauty can overwhelm you, there is only one thing that can transcend this tree. It is given in the Gita as asanga, the sword of non-attachment. Instead of fighting you, I allow you to be. I do not merely allow you to be, I also include you. I accept you. When I accept you, I have already taken the zest to fight away from you. In the face of my calmness, you also become calm. So if winning is your motive, win the heart. When you fight, not only does the other perish, you also perish. There is an Indian myth that a certain demon came and challenged Balarama, the brother of Shri Krishna. Balarama accepted the challenge. He went, raising his fist to smash its head. Then the demon became twice the size of Balarama. Seeing this, Balarama, who had psychic powers, grew double the size of the demon. The demon doubled in size again and started lifting hills to throw at him. Then Balarama realized he could not overpower the demon. He turned to Shri Krishna and asked for help. Shri Krishna smiled and said, "Brother, leave him to me. I'll deal with him." The demon turned to Krishna and found that in his hand there was no weapon. Krishna stood with his hands open and smiled. Then the demon became the size of an average human being. Krishna still stood there with his bewitching smile and said, "Come on, friend." He came close and became smaller than Krishna. Krishna patted him. He became very small. Then Krishna took him in his hand and stroked him. He became so tiny. Then Balarama came and said, "Brother, I don't understand this. How did he become so small? How did you tame him?" He replied, "Brother, don't you know this demon's name?" "No. This demon's name is Krodha, anger. When you become angry, you are only feeding him. He thrives on somebody else's anger. When you take away your anger, there is nothing to nourish him. He becomes less and less. So when I gave him love, there is nothing on which he can feed himself, and he became very small. This is also the central teaching of Buddha. With hatred, you never appease hatred, but with love, you win all. The free translation of verse 46 is as follows. It is not possible to vanquish any religion by fighting it. By becoming competitive and fighting each other's religion, the zeal of the members of the persecuted religion only increases. By promoting religious feuds, one is only destroying one's own integrity and succumbing to the evils of hatred. This should never be forgotten.